I checked the account out of habit, right before work, like I always do. I wasn't worried or anything. Just one of those little morning rituals, like brushing your teeth or opening the fridge even when you know it's empty. There was supposed to be almost $3,200 in there. I'd been saving since October, and what I saw was $84.77. Then I scrolled down and saw DraftKings, PayPal, Venmo, and DraftKings again. And I swear for a second I thought my app was broken. It was one of those wet Portland Mondays where it feels like the sky has given up. The windows were sweating, the cat didn't move from the heater vent, and the air in the apartment had that sour, leftover coffee smell that always sets the tone wrong. I was standing in the kitchen, waiting for the microwave to beep, holding my chipped blue mug in both hands like it might calm me down, when I thought, okay, let's just make sure the money's where it's supposed to be. I had a system, not a strict budget exactly, but I was tracking things, skipping takeout, cutting back on the little luxuries, using a shared Google Doc with hotel links and flight alerts. This trip meant something to me. I wasn't saving casually. Every dumb spreadsheet had purpose. So yeah, seeing $84.77 instead of the $3,000 plus I was counting on felt like getting hit by a car that didn't make any sound. At first, I genuinely thought maybe it was a glitch. I closed the app, reopened it, even restarted my phone like some desperate idiot who thinks the software just forgot her money existed. But no, it was all there. Or rather, gone. And the list of charges read like a timeline of slow betrayal. $118.25, DraftKings. $95, Cash App. James. $50, Venmo. $125.90, DKIC. Over and over. Random numbers, stupid nicknames, tiny digital wounds. For about a minute, I thought maybe it was fraud. I mean, what else do you think when your account is suddenly hemorrhaging cash? I started checking device logins, seeing if some stranger in another city had hacked me. But nope. Every transaction had been made from our home Wi-Fi. The device was a Pixel, his phone. The backup number was his too. The email address on file was his Gmail. Everything screamed James. And I stood there, still holding my stupid microwave-warmed coffee, staring at that screen, trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. But there wasn't. It was him. It had been him. I didn't message him. I didn't even think about calling. There was nothing I wanted to hear from his mouth that could possibly make sense. Instead, I put the coffee down, got dressed like a zombie, and left for work without even feeding the cat, who glared at me like he knew something was off. Outside, it was raining, that steady, useless Portland kind of rain that doesn't soak you instantly but seeps through your jacket anyway, and the wind near Pioneer Square cuts between the buildings like it's chasing something, which is fitting because I was basically walking around feeling like someone had ripped a piece of my insides out and replaced it with fog. I don't remember most of the workday. I know I was there. I know I answered emails and nodded through meetings and probably smiled when I was supposed to. But I couldn't tell you what anyone said or what I did, because all I could hear in my head was that total, $84.77, over and over like a broken radio. At one point, I caught myself just staring at my screen, not even blinking, while my coworker Leah explained something about client onboarding. I nodded, but I had no idea what she said. I think she knew something was off. I was too quiet, even for me. All day I kept thinking about the trip, that dumb little San Diego plan we had, the hotel with the rooftop pool, the tacos we bookmarked, the weekend itinerary I made in a Google Doc I never shared because I wanted it to be a surprise, all that saving, all those lunches skipped, the nights I stayed home instead of going out just so I could put another $20 away. And he just took it, quietly, behind my back. For what? Bets? Games? Some fantasy where he'd win it all back and I'd never know? When I finally got home, the lights were on like always, and everything looked so normal it made me want to scream. James was on the couch, legs up, eating cup noodles straight from the container like it was just any other night. There was an open soda on the coffee table, one sock hanging off the side like he'd kicked it off mid-scroll, and the TV was playing something loud and pointless, probably Twitch or YouTube. He glanced up, gave me a casual, "Hey," like he hadn't gutted my savings while I was sleeping next to him for weeks. I didn't say anything. I didn't kick off my shoes. I didn't hang up my coat. I just walked straight into the kitchen, pulled out my phone, opened the bank app again, scrolled to the transaction history, and shoved it in front of his face without a word. He blinked, leaned back a little, and took the phone. His eyes darted down the screen, and for a second, just one, I thought I saw something real flicker across his face. Not guilt, not fear, just recognition. Like, oh, right. I guess this is the part where she finds out. He handed the phone back to me. Didn't even try to fake a smile. Just rubbed his forehead and muttered, "I'll pay it back." It's just not that simple. And I stood there, dripping from the rain, coat still on, phone clenched in one hand like a weapon I didn't know how to use, and all I could think was, how long had he been planning to get caught? Or maybe he didn't plan at all. Maybe he just assumed I wouldn't notice. Maybe he thought I'd be cool with it, like it was just our money, and not the literal result of every compromise I'd made for 6 straight months. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look that bothered. Just kept eating his noodles and picked the remote back up like the conversation was over. And I just stood there thinking, this isn't about the money. This is about the fact that he thought I wouldn't matter enough to ask. I don't know what I expected him to say. Maybe some kind of apology with actual weight behind it, or at least the decency to look up from his damn noodles when I handed him the phone. But nope. He didn't even move. Just sat there, slouched deep into the couch cushions like they were shielding him from consequences, eyes flicking over the screen like he was checking the weather instead of scrolling through evidence that he'd drained my savings account one sports bet at a time. His first sentence, and I swear, I will hear this in my sleep for the rest of my life, was, "Okay, look, it was just temporary, like a cash flow gap. I was going to put it back, I swear." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "That was messed up." Just that. Like he accidentally used the wrong credit card at a grocery store instead of systematically bleeding out the trip fund we'd been talking about for months. He still didn't look at me, just kind of hunched forward like the floor was the only safe place to focus. He scratched the back of his neck, which is what he always does when he's lying, and mumbled something about timing, and a streak that was supposed to hit, and the stats lined up, like any of that mattered now. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have things to say. God, I had pages of things to say. But because I needed to see where this was going, how far he'd push it, how deep into the bullshit he'd let himself go. He kept talking like I was a therapist he hadn't booked, going on about how he didn't want to bother me with the stress, and how he really believed he was going to flip it into double, maybe triple, and fix everything before I even noticed. The part that really hit? When he said, "It just spiraled a bit, got out of control, but not like in a scary way." And I almost laughed, because wow, that word choice? Not in a scary way? Was I supposed to feel better because he didn't pawn my laptop or bet the rent? At some point, maybe to prove something or maybe because he genuinely thought it would help. He pulled out his phone and opened the betting app. He tapped through a few menus, then showed me the balance screen with this proud, slightly desperate smile like a kid who cleaned one plate after wrecking the entire kitchen. "See?" he said. "I'm back in the green." Plus $160, I looked down. Sure enough, it said $160.42, and right below that, 2 pending bets already placed, one on a Yankees game, the other on some college team I'd never heard of. I looked at the screen, then at him, and just blinked. I didn't have words for how tired I felt in that moment, like someone had drained every ounce of energy from me and left just the shell that was supposed to keep functioning, pretending it was fine. I finally asked, "Do you realize what that money was for?" And he gave me this look like I was overreacting, like obviously he knew, like I was the one making it a bigger deal than it had to be. So I said it straight. That was our San Diego trip, the one we started planning in October, the one I've been skipping takeout and haircuts and weekends out for, the thing we said we'd do together. I watched his face, waiting for it to land, but it didn't. Not really. He shrugged and said, "I didn't think you were, that serious about it." That was the moment, right there, more than the lies, more than the theft. That sentence gutted me. I'd been doing mental math for months, picking cheaper groceries, re-wearing old jeans, turning down things I wanted to say yes to, all to make this happen. I'd treated this trip like a tiny light at the end of a very long gray tunnel, and he thought it was just some cute idea I'd forget about by spring. I felt stupid. I felt invisible. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there for a minute, let the silence stretch, then went into the bedroom and opened my laptop. I pulled up every bill, every shared account, every subscription and auto payment linked to the joint card, and started making a list. I pulled all the passwords into a file, disabled auto renewals, started changing logins, removing my email, unlinking my info. I didn't even look at him when he walked past the doorway with his cup of noodles, slurping like nothing was happening. He finally noticed what I was doing around 9 p.m., when I was halfway through canceling a meal kit subscription he insisted on but never used. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You're going to the bank or something? Really?" I didn't even pause. I just said, "No, I'm saving what's left." My voice was louder than I expected, sharper. It surprised even me. He didn't argue, just stood there for a second, then walked back to the couch and turned the TV on. And that was the whole thing. No apology, no resolution, no fight even. Just him, the couch, Twitch, and my bank account in pieces. It's weird how a breakup can start without anyone saying the actual words. 1 minute you're still technically together, eating under the same roof, brushing your teeth in the same sink, splitting the same groceries, and then you blink and realize you've gone a whole week without touching each other, without having a real conversation, without even fighting, just silence, stretched thin across everything like dust on a table no one's wiped in months. That was us, still sleeping in the same apartment, still a couple on paper. But we may as well have been two strangers stuck in the same Airbnb, waiting out a delayed flight. He started coming home later. I started leaving earlier. And the only sign we lived together anymore was the pile of his dirty t-shirts that kept growing in the corner of the bathroom, damp and slouched like they knew no one cared anymore. I got into this new habit, maybe not new, but obsessive now, of counting every dollar in my head like it was a scorecard I had to balance before the next disaster hit. $9.75 for lunch at the deli downstairs because I didn't have the energy to meal prep. $6.30 for an Uber because it rained again and I couldn't face the bus. $4.25 for a coffee that I didn't even finish, but bought anyway just to feel a tiny bit normal. Every transaction hit different now. Every small indulgence felt like cheating on my own survival plan. It's wild how fast you go from doing fine to calculating milk costs in the checkout line and quietly panicking. And the worst part? I was still sharing a lease and a fridge and a cat with someone who hadn't asked me a single thing about how I was doing. Not once. Leah, from work, noticed first. I didn't think I was being that obvious, but she caught me zoning out during a client call, just staring at the screen like it might swallow me whole if I looked long enough. She didn't say anything that day, but the next afternoon, when I was reheating the same sad lentils for the third day in a row, she leaned on the break room counter and said, "You want to get a drink tonight?" I told her no at first, said I was tired, had errands, whatever. And she just nodded, but added, "I'll be at that little bar on 5th if you change your mind. No pressure." I changed my mind, mostly because I didn't want to go home. The thought of walking into that quiet, emotionally moldy apartment and pretending not to see the tension piled in the corner like his laundry. No thanks. So I went. I didn't even change clothes, just showed up in my work hoodie and bought the first round to avoid making her feel sorry for me. We sat at a sticky table near the window and shared fries, and for the first 30 minutes, we talked about everything except me. Then, somewhere between her third whiskey and my second cider, I said it. Out loud. "I don't think this is fixable." Leah didn't blink. She didn't launch into a pep talk or ask me why or tell me I owed it one more try. She just swirled the ice in her glass and said, "Then don't fix it. Not everything needs to be glued back together." And maybe it was the simplicity of it, the way she made it sound like walking away didn't mean I failed. But something in me cracked open just a little. Not all the way, but enough. Back at the apartment, nothing had changed. The dishes I left in the sink that morning were still there. His shoes were kicked off in the same careless angle, half on the rug, half not. The TV was off, the lights were dim, and the cat meowed at me like I was late. James was in the bedroom, probably asleep, probably pretending to be. I didn't check. I just microwaved a leftover burrito, sat on the floor with the cat, and scrolled through Zillow listings I couldn't afford. 2 days later, I noticed the notifications. I wasn't even snooping. His tablet was on the couch, open, still connected to Wi-Fi, and the screen lit up with a pop-up from the betting app. Then another, and another. I stared at them for a minute before I picked it up. Not only was he still betting, he wasn't even trying to hide it. The browser history was wide open, packed with bets and game schedules and Reddit threads about smart parlays. He hadn't even cleared the tabs. It was like he didn't care if I saw anymore. I waited until the next day to say something, mostly because I didn't trust myself to stay calm. He was in the kitchen, making cereal at 3 p.m., like it was breakfast, and I just asked, no drama, no yelling, "So you're betting again?" He didn't flinch, didn't even pause pouring the milk. He just said, "You already decided you're leaving, right? So what does it matter?" And I swear, I actually choked for a second. Not on air, not physically, just choked on the audacity, because that sentence, "What does it matter?" said more than any fight ever could. It told me everything I needed to know. That he thought my silence was permission. That he believed my withdrawal meant he could stop trying altogether. That this wasn't a team anymore. Hadn't been for a while. That night he went out. Said he was meeting the guys. Which, let's be honest, could have meant anyone or no one. He didn't invite me. Didn't ask if I needed anything. Just threw on that old hoodie with the ripped sleeve and walked out like he was single again, and had been for weeks. I didn't ask when he'd be back. I didn't care. He stumbled in the next morning around 6. I was on the couch with the blanket and the cat, half asleep with the TV still playing some documentary I wasn't following. The door creaked open, and I smelled beer. Something greasy, and that unmistakable mix of sweat and bar air. He dropped his keys twice, cursed under his breath, and when he finally made it to the kitchen, I heard him tearing into something. Foil, probably a shawarma wrap or one of those massive gas station burritos. He didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything to him. And I think that silence, that complete, exhausted, nothing left to explain kind of silence, was the real breakup. I wasn't even angry when I left the house that morning. I wasn't calm either. but it was more of that quiet, cold focus you get when you've cried enough and now you're just trying to get through the checklist. The plan was simple. Go to the bank, close the joint account, open something new, move what little I had left over, and finally put up a wall between my money and whatever hole he kept throwing it into. I had my folder with ID, printouts, passwords scribbled on Post-its. The kind of errand you don't want to do, but need to, just to feel like something in your life is still in your control. I was sitting across from this very tired-looking guy in a green tie who kept typing with only 2 fingers, when he looked up from the screen and said, "Actually, there's been a recent deposit, $1,200 3 days ago." For a second, I didn't understand what he meant, because obviously I hadn't deposited anything, and definitely not that much. I asked if it was from my card or a transfer from my other account, but he shook his head and said, "No, external source, not linked to your information." I felt my stomach drop. I pulled the phone out of my bag and opened the account app, and there it was, clear as day, $1,200. I sat there staring at it, trying to figure out how money I didn't put there was now sitting in an account I was halfway through closing. My first thought was fraud. Then, way worse, I thought maybe it was a refund or some bank error, and they'd take it back any minute. But then it hit me like a ton of bricks. James. It had to be James. But where the hell would he get that kind of money? It didn't take long to find out. 2 days later, my dad texted me out of nowhere asking if the surprise James mentioned had been a success. I called him immediately, feeling that weird, shaky panic in my hands, and asked what he was talking about. He sounded completely normal, like this was something we were all in on, and said James had reached out a couple weeks back, said he wanted to do something special for our trip, maybe upgrade the hotel or cover flights or whatever, and that it was supposed to be a secret gesture, a kind of thank you for how hard I'd been working. I couldn't even speak at first. The words just jammed in my throat. I had to sit down on the edge of my bed while my dad kept talking, like he thought this was still a sweet story. When I finally managed to say, "Dad, I didn't know about that," he went quiet for a few seconds, then said, "I thought you did. He made it sound like you were in on it. I didn't want to interfere." That sentence, "I didn't want to interfere," just cracked something in me. Because, yeah, sure, my dad had no idea what was really going on. But the fact that James had pulled him into this without even asking me, without even warning me, like I was some clueless side character in a con, hit harder than any of the bets or lies or weird silences ever could. I felt like I'd been pulled into a script I didn't even know was being written, and now everyone had a line except me. The worst part? I couldn't even get angry at my dad. He trusted him. He thought he was helping. He didn't know he was just funding a guilt deposit to a broken relationship. On the way back from work that night, I was shaking, not in a dramatic, storming out of the building way, more like my body didn't know how to hold all the pressure anymore, like I was too full of disappointment and confusion to even function normally. The sky was doing that gross Portland drizzle thing again, and everything smelled like wet concrete and cheap cigarettes. I stopped at the little corner market to grab milk and ended up just standing in front of the fridge for 5 full minutes, staring at nothing, until the guy behind the counter coughed on purpose like I was making it weird. When I finally got home, the lights were on, and the living room was a disaster. Packing materials everywhere, boxes half open, receipts sticking out from under the couch cushions. James was kneeling in front of one of the boxes, unwrapping what looked like a brand new mic setup or maybe a camera rig. I don't even know. There was a UPS slip still stuck to the side of one of the packages. He looked up when I walked in and said, completely casually, "If you want, I can give you back half." Half. He said that. Like this was some investment we both agreed to and not a betrayal that came wrapped in bubble wrap. I dropped my bag by the door and said, "What the hell is this?" And he stood up slowly, like I was overreacting, and shrugged, like the whole situation was just inconvenient, not insane. I don't even remember everything I yelled. It wasn't a dramatic speech or some neatly composed monologue. It was messy. It came out like a flood. I know I said, "Those were my savings. That was my trip. You stole from me. And now you've dragged my dad into it? What the hell is wrong with you?" And he didn't even flinch. He just rubbed his face and said, "I was trying to fix it. I thought maybe if I handled it in my own way, it'd be better. I didn't mean to." And I cut him off because I was done listening to that voice, that tone, that fake logic. I didn't even finish the fight. I just grabbed my backpack from the hallway, shoved my laptop and charger inside, and left. Leah didn't ask questions when I showed up at her door. She just stepped aside, pointed toward the futon in her guest room and said, "It's all yours." I didn't cry. I didn't talk. I didn't do anything, really. I just sat down, kicked off my shoes, and stared at the ceiling for a long time, while the apartment made those quiet old building noises that only show up at night. It was the first night in 2 years that I didn't fall asleep next to him. And I didn't feel free. I didn't feel strong. There's something incredibly unsexy about spreadsheets. But I swear to God, few things have ever made me feel more powerful than the moment I sat down at Leah's kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started listing out every shared bill, subscription, payment, and expense James and I had ever touched. Netflix, Spotify, Wi-Fi, groceries. That stupid $9.99 per month password manager he insisted on and never used. All of it. I went line by line, like I was doing forensic work on my own life, like I needed to map out where the break started, how deep it ran, and exactly what parts of me he'd managed to chip off without me noticing. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just wanted clarity. Numbers on paper, columns that added up, a balance I could stare at and say, "This was mine, that was his, we're done." I pulled statements from my email, logged into accounts we hadn't used in months, took screenshots of every payment I made that he never paid back. I copied it all into a doc, labeled everything clearly, added up what was owed, what I already covered, what I was walking away from just to keep the peace. And when it was done, I emailed it to him with the subject line, "Split breakdown. Final." I didn't write a long message, just dropped the numbers in and said, "Let me know what you disagree with. Otherwise, I'd like the balance settled by the 15th. No emojis, no sighing paragraphs, no emotional debris, just facts." I sat back afterward with the weirdest feeling. Not relief, not satisfaction, but something quieter. Like I'd just sealed a box that had been leaking for months. He replied 6 hours later. And of course, it wasn't about the numbers. It was about principle. His exact words were, "So just FYI, this was a joint account, meaning legally, that was our money. You're acting like I robbed you, but I didn't. Technically speaking, I don't have to give anything back." That part, technically speaking, nearly made me laugh. Not because he was wrong, though he was, but because it was the most James line imaginable. The kind of thing you say when you're out of integrity but still want to win on a technicality. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to, but because nothing I could have written would have mattered. He'd already made up his version of the story, and there was no point trying to write myself back into it. Instead, I took the bus to Wells Fargo the next morning, printed out every bank statement for the past 6 months, and sat at the little table near the glass wall filling out a transaction affidavit. I didn't plan to sue or make it some legal nightmare. I just wanted something on file, a statement, a record, something that said, "This happened," and I saw it clearly enough to say so. The woman at the counter was quiet but kind. She didn't ask questions. She didn't press. Just handed me the forms and said, Take your time. I think she knew the kind of quiet rage I was holding in my shoulders, the kind that starts when someone takes from you, looks you dead in the eye, and says it was theirs all along. By the time I got back to Leah's, the texts had already started. First came the defensive ones. Wow, okay, so you're really gonna blow this whole thing up over money? Then the soft ones. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how else to fix it. Then angry again. You're literally impossible to please. I tried to help and now you're acting like I'm evil. One of them just said, You really gonna ruin everything over a few bills? That one got to me. Not because I believed it, but because for a second, it reminded me how small he thought this was. That he still couldn't see what he broke. That he thought if he threw enough words at me, one would stick, and I'd start to doubt myself. But I didn't. Later that night, I told Leah about the messages. She was sitting on the floor folding laundry, drinking boxed wine straight from the glass measuring cup, because apparently every normal mug was in the dishwasher. She didn't even look up. Just said, He didn't ruin it because of money. He ruined it because he thought he could, and that you wouldn't notice. And that hit harder than anything he'd said. Because yeah, that was it. It was never about the dollars. It was about the lie he told himself. That I wouldn't check, wouldn't mind, wouldn't leave. The lie that said I was too easy to forgive him to hold him accountable. The next morning, I started apartment hunting. I didn't have much saved, and I knew I wasn't ready for my own place yet. But I needed a new zip code. I found a Craigslist listing for a room in a dusty old house on Southeast Division. Small, half-finished floors, clawfoot tub, shared with 2 girls and a rescue cat named Crumbs. The rent was doable, and the landlord seemed decent in that sends texts with no punctuation kind of way. I toured it the same day and signed the sublease the next morning. I texted James later that night. Not a long message. Just, I'm moving out Saturday. I'd prefer you not be there. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, it said, So that's it then? Moving day was exactly as quiet and strange as I expected, but it still managed to feel worse than it should have. I'd imagined maybe some final standoff or one last fight that would wrap everything up with a satisfying slam of a door. But nope. He just sat there. Same spot on the couch, headphones on, watching Twitch like I wasn't carrying 3 years of my life out of that apartment box by box. I'd stacked everything I owned near the door the night before. Didn't sleep much. Just kept organizing stuff I'd already packed twice, trying to distract myself from the fact that this time, I wasn't just crashing at Leah's or running away for a night. This was it. My toothbrush wasn't coming back. I made 3 trips to the car. He didn't look up once. On the 4th trip, when I came back in to grab the last load, a tote bag full of chargers and the cat's old blanket I couldn't bring myself to throw out, he finally took off one headphone and said, Flat. Hope it was worth it. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there holding that stupid tote bag, staring at him with the kind of exhausted silence that comes from weeks of screaming in your own head. Then I nodded. Not because I was sure, not because it felt triumphant, but because I didn't have anything left to say. What was I gonna do? Argue about closure with a guy who thought watching someone carry their life out the door didn't even merit pausing the stream? I walked out without slamming the door. That felt important somehow, like maybe I could leave one thing in this story unsmashed. The new room was small and smelled faintly like peppermint and dust. The floor creaked every time I took a step, and the window looked out over a coffee shop with a neon sign that buzzed inconsistently, like it couldn't decide whether it was open or just tired. I didn't bring a lot with me. 2 suitcases, a sad stack of books, a folding table I planned to use as a desk. I didn't even bother unpacking that night. Just sat on the floor, legs crossed, plastic fork in hand, eating cup noodles like it was all I could manage, which, honestly, it was. I didn't check my phone. That's how I knew something had shifted. Because every night for months I'd gone to bed hoping for a message, dreading a message, needing to see something just to know where we stood. But not that night. I put my phone on silent, tossed it on the floor next to my half-unpacked bag, and didn't touch it again until morning. 2 days later, I got a transfer from my dad. No warning, no phone call, just a Zelle notification and a message that said, "I sent the amount. Use it on yourself, and don't trust people who do secret things with shared things." I stared at the message longer than I probably should have. There was something in it that stung in a way I didn't expect. Not because he was wrong, but because he was so right. That was the thing I hadn't admitted out loud. That maybe the worst part of all this wasn't even what James did with the money. It was that I let it happen. That I assumed joint meant mutual. That I kept believing silence meant respect. That I didn't notice how far the line had moved until my bank account was almost empty, and my dad had been pulled into the mess without even knowing why. I didn't reply right away. I needed a minute, or maybe a day. When I finally texted him back, all I said was, "Thanks. I'll be okay." And I meant it. Kind of. A week later, I booked a flight to San Diego. Not because I was running away. I wasn't in the mood to romanticize anything. But because I needed a clean horizon and a sky that didn't look like the inside of a dishwater glass. I bought the ticket with part of what my dad sent, not out of spite or symbolism, but because I wanted to do one thing that had been mine from the start. Something I planned and followed through on. Even if it didn't look how I pictured it back when we were two people sharing Google Docs and hotel tabs. I didn't go fancy. Just a budget seat on a late flight, an Airbnb a few blocks from the beach, and one personal bag. No plans, no expectations. I wasn't looking for clarity or healing or any of that self-help nonsense people pretend happens when you change time zones. I just wanted to sit in the sun, feel sand in my shoes, and let my brain stop looping the same 6 conversations over and over like some haunted voicemail box I forgot to empty. And yeah, I guess I didn't tell anyone. Not James, not even Leah. I just left. I think I needed it to be quiet. I took Crumb's old blanket with me. Don't ask me why. On the flight there, I wrote out a list in my notes app of all the things I wasn't going to bring back. Not items, but patterns. The second guessing. The apologizing for things I didn't do. The way I used to keep my voice down just to keep the room calm. The pretending not to notice. The budgeting alone. The way I'd convinced myself that we meant shared decisions, when it really meant shared damage control. I didn't want any of that anymore. And maybe that sounds dramatic, or maybe it sounds like I'm trying to write a punchy ending to something that didn't deserve one. But here's the truth. Some stories don't end with a clean break, or a new relationship, or some grand realization about self-worth. Sometimes they end in a creaky-floored room with a buzzing coffee sign across the street, a half-eaten cup of noodles, and no unread messages. Sometimes that's the whole point. Because yeah, you think when you share a card with someone, you're sharing trust. You think joint means equal, that if they've got access to your account, they've got your back. You think love and money are just logistics, and then you find out one person was making withdrawals, and the other was peeling off skin.